The word cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a blade through silk. Weak. Sloane Harrington laughed as she said it. Not a kind laugh. Not the laugh of someone sharing a joke or finding genuine amusement in a moment. This was the sharp, dismissive sound of someone who had already made up her mind about who Callahan Weston was and what he was worth. A single father who worked with his hands. A man who fixed things for a living. A man who measured his success in sawdust and school pickups rather than corner offices and quarterly bonuses. She glanced at her wine glass, then back at him, letting the word hang in the air between them like smoke from a dying fire. Cal did not flinch at the insult. He simply checked his watch, thinking of Wren waiting at home with the babysitter, and wondered how much longer basic politeness required him to stay at this table. Outside the window of the restaurant, a man in a wrinkled coat stood on the sidewalk, staring at the front door with an intensity that made passing pedestrians cross to the other side of the street. Something in the air shifted without anyone inside noticing. The morning had started like any other morning in the Weston household. Cal stood in his workshop behind the house, the smell of oak and linseed oil greeting him like an old friend. Sawdust covered the floor in soft golden drifts. Tools hung in precise rows on pegboard walls. The morning light filtered through windows that needed cleaning, casting warm rectangles across the workbench, where a half-finished cabinet waited for his attention. In the corner, on a little stool he had built specifically for her, sat Wren, 7 years old, wild brown hair that refused to stay in any braid for longer than an hour. Eyes the exact same shade of green as her mother's had been. Her tongue poked out in concentration as she drew on a large sheet of paper. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" "A horse with wings," Wren said without looking up. "A Pegasus. That's the proper name." Cal smiled. He turned back to his workbench, running his fingers along the grain of the maple wood. Good maple, from a tree that had fallen in old Mrs. Patterson's yard last spring. It would make a beautiful cabinet. Someone would put it in their home, and it would hold their things and it would last for decades. That was what he loved about this work. The permanence of it, the honesty. On the shelf above his workbench, a photograph watched over him. Emmeline. Emmy. Her smile frozen in that single captured moment. The photograph was 3 years old now. Sometimes it felt like 3 days. Sometimes it felt like 3 centuries. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister-in-law Tessa confirming dinner plans for tonight. A blind date at Maple and Stone. Her name was Sloane. She was successful. "Dad?" He looked up. Wren had stopped drawing. She was watching him with those 2 perceptive eyes. "You're making the sad face again." "I'm not making a sad face." "You are. You always make that face when you look at Mom's picture." Wren walked over and wrapped her small arms around his leg. "It's okay, Dad. You can find a new friend. I don't mind." Cal knelt down, brushing a strand of wild hair from her face. "I love you, Wren." "I love you too, Dad. Now let go. You're squishing my drawing arm." 40 minutes across the city, in a penthouse apartment that cost more per month than most people earned in a year, Sloane Harrington stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the sun set over Hartford. The apartment was immaculate. Every surface gleamed. Every piece of furniture had been selected by a designer. The art on the walls was original, purchased at galleries in New York and Boston. She was holding a glass of wine that she hadn't yet tasted. 34 years old, successful by every metric that society used to measure success, and completely, utterly alone. Her hand moved unconsciously to her left ring finger, where a diamond engagement ring had once lived. 5 years ago, Marcus. He had proposed on a beach, and she had said yes. Then he had met someone else, someone softer, someone who had time to be loved. Sloane had thrown herself into work after that, building her company, climbing higher, proving that she didn't need anyone. And she had succeeded so completely that now, on a Thursday evening in October, she had no one to call. No one who would notice if she didn't come home tonight. On the coffee table, her phone displayed photos from a college friend's social media, a family dinner, children laughing, a husband with his arm around his wife. Sloane stared at the images for a long moment. Then she turned off the phone and finished her wine in one long swallow. She would go to this dinner. She would be charming and impressive. And then she would come home to this beautiful, empty apartment and pretend that this was the life she had chosen. The restaurant was called Maple and Stone. It occupied a converted general store in the old part of Ashford, Connecticut, where exposed brick walls held up a century of small-town history. Edison bulbs hung from oxidized copper pipes, casting warm pools of amber light across reclaimed wood tables. Cal arrived 15 minutes early. He always did. Punctuality was a habit drilled into him during years of crisis response work, where being late meant someone didn't get help in time. He chose a table near the back, close to the kitchen door, clear sight line to the main entrance. He didn't consciously think about these choices anymore. They were automatic. He no longer worked in crisis response, hadn't for 3 years, but the training had settled into his bones. Sloane swept in 12 minutes late. She was attractive in a polished, precise way. Blonde hair cut in sharp geometric angles. Makeup applied with architectural precision. Everything about her suggested control and deliberate choice. She did not apologize for being late. For the next 40 minutes, Sloane talked. She talked about her company, her corner office, her trips to Europe, her plans to expand into new markets. Cal listened. He nodded when appropriate. He thought about Ren at home, probably teaching Tessa the proper plural of Pegasus. "So you just build things?" Sloane asked, the question arriving like a verdict. "Cabinets mostly, custom furniture, whatever people need." "And that's enough for you? Just working with your hands all day?" Cal took a measured sip of his water. "It's honest work, and it lets me be home when my daughter needs me. That matters more than anything else." Sloane's expression flickered through pity, then contempt, then settled into condescension. "That's very noble, I suppose, in a simple, limited sort of way." "I had a demanding career before," Cal said quietly. "I gave it up to be there for my daughter after her mother died." Something flickered in Sloane's eyes, but it passed quickly. "Well, I suppose some people are meant to build empires, and some people are meant to build bookshelves." That was when she said it. Weak. A real man doesn't let his life be limited by responsibilities, by playing parent. Cal looked at her for a long moment. He had learned that some conversations weren't worth having. Some people spoke not to communicate, but to establish hierarchy. He checked his watch instead, and that was when the front door opened, letting in a gust of October air and something else entirely. The man who stepped inside was perhaps 50 years old, thinning gray hair that hadn't been washed recently, a face that hadn't seen restful sleep in many days. His clothes were wrinkled and mismatched. His winter coat hung open despite the evening chill. Cal's assessment was automatic, the old training kicking in. Not drunk. Something deeper. Something that lived in the places where desperation and isolation grew roots. The man stood in the entrance, scanning the dining room with fever-bright eyes, searching for something with an urgency that made conversations falter and die. Cal's hand moved to his water glass. He lifted it slowly, masking the way his entire body had shifted into alert mode. He was counting exits now, 2 visible, the front door currently blocked, a service entrance through the kitchen. He was counting people, 23 diners, 4 staff members, too many people, too few ways out. The stranger shuffled toward the bar, muttering words no one could understand. His hands were shoved deep in his coat pockets, hidden from view. That single detail lodged in Cal's awareness like a splinter. "You're not even listening to me," Sloane said, irritation sharpening her voice. Near the window, a young couple sat with their toddler in a high chair. The little girl was maybe 3 years old. Curly brown hair, a yellow dress matching the crayons she used to draw on a placemat. Cal's heart clenched. She looked so much like Ren at that age. The stranger stopped walking. He was standing right beside the young family now, swaying on his feet, muttering louder. The father pulled his chair closer to his wife, creating a barrier between the stranger and his family. "I need to use the restroom," Sloane announced, pushing back from the table. Cal almost stopped her, but the stranger hadn't actually done anything yet. He let her go. The moment Sloane disappeared, Cal was on his feet. He crossed the dining room smoothly, casually, pausing beside the elderly couple 2 tables away. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "There's a gentleman having a difficult time. I'd like you to head toward the kitchen when you get a chance. There's a back exit." 2 small nods. He moved to the next table. Same quiet instruction, same calm demeanor. The restaurant slowly began to empty, diners drifting toward the kitchen in 2s and 3s. Ordinary movements. Unremarkable exits. 23 people when this started. Maybe 12 remained. Cal was helping a young woman gather her purse when the stranger erupted. His palms slammed against the bar. The sound cracked through the restaurant like a gunshot. "Nobody leaves!" The stranger's voice was raw, torn from some deep wound. "Nobody moves. I've been trying to talk to people for months. Nobody listens. So now you're all going to sit down and listen." The little girl in the yellow dress began to cry. Cal stepped in front of the young woman, shielding her. His heart hammered. Adrenaline flooded his system, but his face remained calm. "Okay," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "We're listening. You have our complete attention." The stranger's head snapped toward him. "Who the hell are you?" "Just a customer. My name's Cal. What's yours?" "I didn't ask for your name." "No, but if we're going to listen, we should know who we're listening to." Something shifted in the stranger's posture. The rage was still there, but beneath it, Cal could see exhaustion, grief, the desperate loneliness of a man screaming into a void. "Garrett," the stranger said finally. "Garrett Hollins." "Okay, Garrett, what did you want to tell us?" "They took everything from me." Garrett's voice cracked. "My job, my house, my wife. 22 years I gave to that company, and they threw me away like garbage." Cal took a small step forward, not aggressive, just closer. "That's not right. Nobody should be treated that way." "You don't know anything about it." "Then help me understand." In the doorway to the restrooms, Cal glimpsed Sloane standing frozen, watching everything. Garrett was talking now, words spilling out. "I was an engineer, HVAC systems, good systems that lasted decades. I was really good at my job." "I believe you." "My wife left 3 months after I lost my job. 20 years of marriage." "That must have been devastating." "My daughter—" Garrett's voice broke completely. Tears streamed down his unshaven cheeks. "My daughter, Nora, she just turned 12. She won't look at me anymore. They put me in a psychiatric hospital for 3 weeks. When I got out, my own daughter looked at me like I was a monster." Cal felt something tighten in his chest. He thought about Ren, the absolute trust in her eyes when she told him she loved him. What would it feel like to lose that? "Garrett," Cal said softly, "can I tell you something about myself?" The stranger's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say no. "I know what it's like to lose everything. I spent 8 years working crisis response in Hartford. When someone was on a bridge or holding a gun to their head, they called us instead of police. My job was to talk to people on the worst days of their lives." Garrett was staring at him now, looking for the lie, finding none. "I left that job 3 years ago because my wife got sick. Emmy, she was diagnosed with cancer, and I had to choose. I could keep saving strangers, or I could be there for the woman I loved." Cal's voice was steady, but barely. "She fought for 8 months. Then she was gone, And I was alone with a 4-year-old daughter who kept asking when mommy was coming home. Silence in the restaurant. For 6 months after Emmy died, I didn't know why I should get out of bed. The only thing that kept me from disappearing was Ren, my daughter, 7 years old now. She needed me to be present, even when I didn't feel like I deserved to be needed. Cal took another step forward. So yes, Garrett, I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel invisible, to feel like the world moved on without you. Garrett's hands were shaking, not with rage anymore, with something like hope. Nora is scared, Cal said gently. She's not looking away because she hates you. She's looking away because she loves you and doesn't know how to handle seeing her father in pain. 12-year-olds aren't equipped for that kind of fear. You think so? I know so. That's what love looks like when it's young and terrified. Garrett's legs gave out. Cal caught him before he hit the floor, guiding him down gently. They knelt together on the hardwood, and Cal put his arms around a complete stranger and held him while the man wept out years of pain. I didn't come here to hurt anyone, Garrett managed between sobs. I swear, I just wanted someone to see me, to hear me. For one moment, I wanted to matter. You matter to Nora, even if she can't show it. You matter more than you know. Garrett's hands came out of his pockets, empty, just shaking, reaching for something solid in a world that had become quicksand. Cal held him tighter. The police entered with weapons drawn, but Cal was already rising, hands visible, voice calm as he explained. No threat, no weapons, just a man in crisis who needed mental health assistance, not handcuffs. The officers recognized something in his demeanor. They holstered their weapons. Paramedics arrived minutes later, helping Garrett toward the ambulance. Will you tell Nora? Garrett asked, looking back with desperate eyes. Tell her I'm trying to get better? Cal squeezed his shoulder. You're going to tell her yourself, when you're better. And you will get better. The ambulance pulled away. Cal gave his statement to police, then stepped outside into the October darkness. The air hit his skin like a blessing. He stood on the sidewalk, hands on knees, letting his heart rate settle. His hands were shaking now. They always did afterward. He called Tessa. Mr. Weston, is everything okay? Everything's fine. Is Ren asleep? About 45 minutes ago, she made you a drawing of a Pegasus. She was very specific about the name. Cal closed his eyes. Ren. Safe. Asleep. Thank you, Tessa. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Footsteps behind him. Sloane stopped a few feet away. Her face was completely different now. The sharp edges softened into uncertainty. I was in the hallway. I watched most of it. Cal nodded. You could have been killed. He could have had a gun. I know. But you stayed. You got all those people out. You held him like he mattered. He does matter. Sloane was quiet for a long moment. I called you weak. I knew nothing about you. You made assumptions. Most people do. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. Sloane's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I don't have anyone. I realized that while I was watching you. I don't have anyone who would run across a yard to show me a drawing. No one who would notice if I disappeared tomorrow. Her voice cracked. 15 years climbing, building something that was supposed to make me feel important. And I'm alone at the top, and nobody cares whether I'm there or not. Cal saw, for the first time, the woman behind the armor. I'm sorry, Sloane said, not because you turned out to be whatever you are, but because I said it at all. I made you small so I could feel bigger. She shook her head, tears threatening. I don't want to be that person anymore. Cal didn't offer absolution. That wasn't his to give. Your daughter, Sloane said. You need to get home. I do. Then go, and thank you for showing me what strength actually looks like. Cal nodded once. Then he walked toward his truck without looking back. Cal drove home through empty streets, hands still shaking on the steering wheel. The house was quiet when he arrived. Tessa was asleep on the couch. His sister-in-law had been a lifeline these past 3 years. On the counter, a plate of cookies sat under plastic wrap with a note in Wren's careful handwriting. "For Daddy, I saved you one." Cal smiled despite everything. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step bringing him closer to the only thing that had kept him anchored. Wren's door was slightly ajar. The purple nightlight cast soft shadows across walls covered with drawings, horses and pegasi and houses. And in every picture, two figures holding hands, one tall, one small. Cal crossed the room and stood beside her bed, looking down at his sleeping child. Her wild hair spread across the pillow, her small chest rising and falling with the trusting breaths of a child who had never doubted she was safe. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I'm trying, Emmy," he whispered, "every single day. I'm trying to be the father she deserves." He stood there for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep. Tomorrow he would build things. Tomorrow he would create something beautiful. But tonight he would simply be grateful. 3 weeks later, Cal was sanding a maple cabinet door when he heard a car in the driveway. He stepped outside and found Sloan standing there with his jacket. The restaurant owner found it. "I told him I'd bring it." Cal took the jacket. "You didn't have to drive 40 minutes for a jacket." "No, I didn't." She looked different. Less polished, less armored, jeans and a simple sweater, hair loose around her shoulders. "I read about what you used to do," she said. "Crisis response. Your unit had the highest success rate in the state." "That was a long time ago. Why did you really leave?" Cal leaned against the workshop doorframe. "Emmy got sick. She needed me. And after she died, building things felt better. Wren needed stability. I needed to create something I could control." The screen door banged open. Wren burst across the yard, launching herself at Cal's legs. "Daddy, Mrs. Patterson gave me cookies, and I only ate 3 because I was saving the rest, but then I got hungry, so I ate 2 more. But there's still one left." Cal laughed, swinging her up. "Very restrained, Jelly Bean." Wren noticed Sloan. She studied the stranger with serious evaluation. "Who are you?" "I'm someone your dad met recently. My name is Sloan." "That's a weird name." Wren tilted her head. "Do you like horses?" "I don't know many horses personally. I draw horses. I could show you. They're mostly pegasi, and that's the plural." Before Cal could respond, Wren grabbed Sloan's hand and pulled her toward the workshop. Inside, Wren led Sloan to the corner where her drawings covered a corkboard. "This one is Starfire, and this is Princess Moonbeam. She's a Pegasus." She paused, suddenly shy. "This one is my favorite." A drawing of 3 figures in front of a house. A tall figure with brown hair, a smaller figure with wild hair, and between them, a figure with yellow hair, holding both their hands. "That's Daddy, and that's me. And that's supposed to be someone who makes Daddy smile." Sloan knelt to Wren's level, eyes bright with tears. "It's beautiful, Wren. The most beautiful drawing I've ever seen." "Really? Really?" Wren studied her for a moment. Then she reached out and patted Sloan's cheek. "You have sad eyes, like Daddy used to have. But it's okay. The sad goes away if you have people who love you." A tear slid down Sloan's cheek. Wren wiped it away with her small thumb. "Don't cry, Miss Sloan. You can come back and visit us. Daddy won't mind." Cal stood in the doorway, watching his daughter comfort a woman who had called him weak 3 weeks ago. Wren had inherited something far more valuable than Emmy's green eyes. She had inherited her mother's gift for seeing the wounded places in people's hearts. 1 year later, the restaurant was called Maple and Stone, and it looked exactly as it had that October night. The same exposed brick, the same amber light, the same reclaimed wood tables, but everything else was different now. Cal sat at a table near the back, the same table where Sloan had called him weak 1 year ago. This time he wasn't alone. Sloan sat across from him, her hand resting near his. She had changed in ways that couldn't be measured by the metrics she once used. 6 months ago, she had walked into the Hartford Mental Health Alliance and asked to volunteer, not as a donor, as someone willing to answer crisis hotlines and facilitate support groups. The director had been skeptical. Corporate executives didn't usually want to do this work, but Sloan had been persistent. Last week, a single mother had called at 2 in the morning. She had lost her job and apartment and was sitting in her car with her children, wondering if anyone would notice if she stopped existing. Sloan talked to her for 3 hours. By sunrise, they had found her a shelter, a food bank, a path forward. Sloan had cried after hanging up, but they were different tears than she had ever cried before. Tears of connection, of purpose, of finally understanding what strength meant. Between them at the restaurant table, in a booster seat, sat Wren. She was drawing, of course, purple crayon moving across a placemat with determined focus. "What are you drawing, Jelly Bean?" "It's a surprise. You can't look yet." "Can I look?" Sloan asked. Wren considered this. "You can look, but don't tell Daddy." Sloan leaned over, and her breath caught. She looked at Cal, eyes suddenly bright. "It's beautiful, Wren." "I know, I'm a very good artist." A letter had arrived last week from Garrett Hollins. He was in treatment now, a residential program upstate. He was talking to Nora again. Phone calls at first, then video calls. Then last month, she had agreed to visit. They went fishing together, the first time in 2 years. "Thank you," Garrett had written. "Thank you for seeing a person when everyone else saw a threat." Cal kept the letter in his workshop, tucked into the frame of Emmy's photograph. "Okay, I'm done," Wren announced. She held up the placemat with pride. 3 figures holding hands, one tall, one medium, one small. Above them, in wobbly 7-year-old letters, "My new family." She had spelled family wrong, but she had gotten everything else exactly right. "It's us," Wren explained. "That's Daddy, and that's Miss Sloan, and that's me. We're a family now." Cal felt his throat tighten. Sloan was crying silently, tears streaming as she looked at a child's drawing that meant more than any contract she had ever signed. "I used to think," Sloan said softly, "that strength was climbing to the top alone, proving you didn't need anyone. And now?" She looked at Wren, at the drawing, at the family that had grown around her. "Now I know that strength is having someone to come home to, someone who would notice if you weren't there." Cal reached across the table and took her hand. "I love you," Sloan said. "I don't know if I'm supposed to say that yet, but I do. Both of you." Wren looked up from examining her masterpiece. "I love you too, Miss Sloan. You make Daddy smile. He didn't smile enough before you came." Cal squeezed Sloan's hand. "She's right. I didn't." Outside the window, October had come around again, the same month that had brought them together 1 year ago. But everything else was different now. And in a restaurant in a small Connecticut town, where 1 year ago a woman had called a man weak and a stranger had walked in from the cold, seeking someone to hear him, a new family sat together in the amber light, learning what strength really meant. It meant showing up every day even when you were broken. It meant holding strangers when they cried. It meant letting people see the parts of you that you were afraid to show. It meant building something that mattered. A cabinet, a company, a family, or simply a single moment of connection. It meant being brave enough to love again. And it meant understanding, finally, that the strongest thing a person could do was admit they couldn't do it alone. Outside, the October wind moved through the oak trees. Leaves fell in slow spirals toward the waiting earth. And somewhere, in homes and hospitals across the country, other broken people were finding their way back to the ones who loved them. One step at a time, one day at a time, one moment of grace at a time, together.